talk about Son of the Void. This is going to be a deep dive. It may or may not be full of spoilers, I will let you know here. But the Son of the Void is two POV characters who are both oppressed in some kind of way and wanted to fit in. One character is being sheltered because of the hierarchy of the rich and the ruling company, and because she's a Valko, okay? So they are trying to marry her off to all sorts of people, and she's trying not to be who she is inside. She's really trapping herself because of religion and all of that jazz. Then you have the other character, Reina, who is an Osriel, who is oppressed. Everybody hates her, even though they have fought for their freedom, but the most of the society still don't look at them on favourably. They don't look at them favourably. Reina gets a letter from her estranged grandmother, who she knew nothing about, and travels across these mountains to go meet her because her father is now dead and she's all alone and she just wants a family, right? You get that from the get-go. But there's these I'm butchering names. I do fucking apologise, okay? I'm trying my best. They are in a mountain that she just thought was a story, okay? And they are created from this dark god. She travels the mountain, gets attacked, heart almost gets eaten, grandmother finds her and saves her, okay? And she has this weird sort of magic that is keeping her heart together, like this weird contraction, okay? So that's where we start the story. And the story is mainly about, the core theme of the story is exploring colonialism and racism and oppression, while also with the main characters who would do anything to continue to fit in, to want to be loved. Like, you get that from both of them, okay? But in different kind of aspects. And they kind of split apart as the characters go on their journey. Overall, I had a fucking fun time, okay? I enjoyed myself. I had a lot of problems with the book, okay? A lot of problems, which I think just boiled down to debut issues, right? But I fucking enjoyed myself. There were parts, like, I took an almost 2,000 word notes about this book, because I still enjoyed myself. I went in expecting to hate this book, and yet I didn't. There were some things I thought were very clumsy. This book is very clumsy in how it's told. It's stumbling over itself, and it's trying to get its message across, and not quite trusting the reader, okay? So if you're new to fantasy, this might be something that maybe you wouldn't have that experience with, but as somebody who's well-versed in the genre, that's something that I just found. There are very things that were very telly, okay? And which is fine in itself, but there were just some things I would have like explored, like Reina's motivation, her questioning her morals as she's following through with what her grandmother wants her to do. And in one case, there is trigger warning baby death, okay, that she's having to force to be able to do. And there is no sort of inner monologue within this character who's really sort of driving that kind of, well, it's a baby, but this is what I want, is what I'm having to do to be able to fit in. There was no sort of questioning of it, especially as, you know, she's walking this baby up to this forest where the Tinnitus live, okay, and it's a way to prove of what they are, because they're hunting the god's wives to try and resurrect him again. And this is how they discover that the wives are who they are. And there are so many failed attempts, and there's nothing really in that character that is really questioning what she's doing is actually correct. And I would have preferred that. I really would have wanted to sit in that struggle as she goes up, because then we get to the scene point and it jumps a lot, and I think it's because it's trying to encompass so much of the story and deal with so many themes, so much that's going on to set up for the rest of the books, which I loved that. But again, it was so jumpy, and I don't know, this could easily be something the editor has put in, or the publisher is capping out word count and saying like no, and I think it would have been a better story if we just had those few more scenes, like a few more word counts, just beef out the book a little bit, because it would have just made it a stronger story overall, in my humble opinion. Humble opinion, as nobody's got anything published yet, okay? But this is just how I found it as a reader. But the world building is done really well. I understand the story, I understand the kind of, I don't want to say it's mythology, but it's definitely rooted in, I think the author is Latina. Correct me if I'm wrong. I will probably have to research this, and I will let you know if I'm wrong or not. But this is where, and I can definitely see it's rooted in kind of that, rooted in her experiences, and rooted in the way that she wants to explore everything, and she wants to show like all of these different things, these different gods, and warring with each other, and oppression, and different creatures, along with humans, and how humans are still seen as very dominant, but then you have so much oppression from the Valkos to the Nazriels, and from the humans to the Valkos. There's so much going on, and it did well enough. I would have preferred it to be a bit better, personally, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. It was just fine. But the world, again, I fucking loved it, even though it's not a place I'd willingly go to live, because I'd like my heart intact, thank you very much. But it was very well done. There were some descriptive moments within this book that was a bit clunky. I didn't quite get it. Like, a lot of people like spicy, something like that was fine for me, but there were just some little things that I was like, oh, okay. And I would have preferred with description if like, you've really narrowed down on the important people. This is what I think you can really do so well with description, is the grandmother is obviously, you know from the get-go, like really early on, that she's not necessarily what she seems she is, okay? And it would have been so nice to use that description to really hone to the reader that actually looking at the way she dresses, looking at the way she moves, as well as the way she acts, but honing down onto her actual description to show that actually this is the antagonist, okay? This is the person you are not meant to like. This is the person that is going to be manipulative. It's going to be all of these things, and that would have just been like the icing on the cake. Like when you go back and look at it, like, oh, that was actually a really clever thing to do. Like, I'd love to see that. I would have loved to see that, but I just found the descriptions very like lackluster, and just sort of inserted in there very early on. It was like quite a lot of description after description, and for me personally, I don't visualise books. I just don't. I don't visualise books. I don't visualise when I read. So to have description after description, I'm a bit like, can we not get to the point? I like my description sprinkled out, but I also don't mind it if you're having it sprinkled out but then you hone in on somebody. That signals to me of, oh, that might be something I have to pay attention to. And like, there was a few phrases, I'm going to pull a few out that I just copied down here, that just was a little bit clunky, which she suddenly realised was wide open and the reason for her agony. That doesn't seem to be delving deep into what I would class as character emotion. I would like to sort of get really descriptive. This was her going through a heart surgery, by the way. Really descriptive on this, like really delve deep on how you want, not gonna know exactly, but like the weird like feeling you'd feel as somebody's delving into your heart, but also the weird kind of, again, the agony and everything all around you, like feeling a little bit overwhelmed because it's like it's emergency surgery. She couldn't consent to any of this. That would have been so well done, and that would have gone, oh, but I also would have fucking loved the shit out of it, okay? Because it's the use of like, which she suddenly realised, I'm like, no, that doesn't really give me any emotion as a reader. And again, another thing, when she's discovered after just being attacked, again, very early on, right? This is not spoiled, it's just like in chapter 1, chapter 2, okay? It's chapter 1. Raina reached for the woman's hand. She gripped it without permission and begged, help, please. I would have kind of gone, like, she clutched this woman's hand, please help me. Like, trying to really drive the yearning that Raina would feel to want to be saved. And then there was a dialogue, and again, I have a lot of issues with the dialogue. I found it very clunky, very kind of stilted in places. And towards the end of the book, it's telling us everything that we should have really been shown. So, like, stuff like things that if we had explored a little bit in the monologue between Raina and Eva, it went over with everything in the dialogue. It's kind of like the villain telling you their story, the villain telling you everything that's happened, and like Raina going like, you used me. It's like, we already know that, like, and you've already come to that conclusion, and I've realised you come to that conclusion. There's no reason for that to be in the dialogue. That's where I just found it got very, very weak. And it's again, it's like Raina reached the woman's hand, she gripped it without permission, begged for help, please. And then somebody else says, unhand her. And to me, that just came a bit like, what? You know, whereas if you kind of go, the bloke stepped forward, threatening, like, not even saying unhand her, but say like release her, or like, you know, don't touch her, and, you know, back away, or just got his sword out, threatened her. That would have been a better implication than using the kind of dialogue of unhand her. And this is where it gets a bit weird with the dialogue, because again, like, I am going to preface this, I did really enjoy this book, right? I did really enjoy this book, but there is also something that I did just find, that a lot of things were just glossed over. Like, we don't get to see the deep moments through dialogue. You decided as the author, which is a choice, and you can do this if you want. Personally, I don't like it. And it's just, you decided that you wanted to tell a lot of things. You glossed over a lot of scenes and emotions, and it's kind of like, oh, and she introduced herself. And I was like, yeah, but that would have been better if you just said, oh, I'm such and such, a new character got introduced, rather than just telling us who this person was. And letting us explore it a little bit more and have more of a back and forth within each character and each scene within each, and with the dialogue, it would have just made it feel far more alive, and the characters have more agency. And talking about characters, right, don't get me wrong, I fucking love them, okay? I love, Eva is the best, okay? At the Tree of POVs, I loved her story, which was a bit kind of odd, going through, it's mainly Raina as the main POV, which is fine, you need a main protagonist, okay? But a lot of Eva's story was just jumped. We had chapters and chapters and chapters of Raina, which is not a problem, but then we'd have one chapter of Eva. Then we go back to chapter and chapter and chapter of Raina until you've almost forgotten Eva exists. Then all of a sudden she's thrust back into the story again. And I understand why she's in the story, especially as you go through the story towards the end, but I think added a few more scenes, sprinkles throughout, just one or two more, that explains more of Eva's motivations, that it really gets you immersed in Eva's kind of world. And to understand everything that's going on, how Eva's world is being turned upside down a little bit, because things happen in Eva's POV that you're just kind of like, but you start to, so the things start, you hinted at things that are going to happen in the next chapter, loads of chapter of Raina, then you get to Eva's chapter, and it's like, the thing has already happened, and you have a massive time jump, and you're like, whoa, hang on a second, what? Last I remember we were here. So I think it would have been very more beneficial to have that a little bit of a stronger kind of scenes that would just implicate a little things, to show Eva really starting to lose her faith in everything that's happening around her, her world being turned upside down, people that she cares for, all of that, rather than just telling us. Because Eva then decided to start to take things into her own hands rather than listening to her grandmother. You noticing a theme here? They're both her grandmother. They are quite similar in when you talk about it. Again, the characters, their dynamics are similar, but they are very different as characters. But you kind of get the whole, so she does try and take that, she takes that leap, but we don't see it. We just get a chapter and a line telling us what she's done and waiting for the answer. And I'm kind of like, okay, I understand that, but where was that discovery? Where was, you know, her fretting and realising and actually deciding to take that step? Instead, she's just taken that step. And that's just where I found it was just a little bit, again, too short and sharp. And I just personally would have just preferred something far more, not even elaborate, just a few more sprinkled scenes throughout that just gives you a little bit understanding and takes you through the story. And again, you know, there's you sort of find the same a little bit with Raina. Like, her decisions and her motivations, they change, and it's quite jarring. It kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit. But I would have, especially when you have religion and faith as a theme within this book, not in a sense of like it's shoving religion down your throat and you should believe in it. It's just part of the story, part of the world, that there's two gods, so there's obviously going to be two religions that people follow and decide not to follow, and people, you know, all of that fucking jazz. When that's involved, and then Raina's motivations change, and it just kind of felt so jarring. It was just all of a sudden it kind of happened, and there was no sort of reasoning behind it. I can kind of understand why she would have done it if it was just mainly for her wanting to fit in and follow what her grandmother wants, but it was more implicated that it implicated that Raina really actually did follow her faith. Whereas if it just wasn't, it's just, again, little things like that which is a little bit jarring. And again, when you explore Raina and her relationship, especially with the people around her, and like Javier and Celeste and all of that, like the antagonism between Javier, it felt very shallow. Like, I understand why Javier, don't know, guessing here, acted how he did, what his prejudices are, but again, there was no reason why she had to be so angry towards him. Bear in mind, he's the son, he was technically classed as the heir of this place. He was, like, he's not a prince, but this whole like magic thing they're gonna inherit. I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible. So I totally understand, like, you know, he's meant to be that, and she's just really biting back at him and all of this, but not to any of the other people there, because she understands she has to show them a little bit of respect, because she's only there under their grace, as a sense. So I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, fine. But then you get her relationship with the other people around her, and it's kind of, you know, we're meant to really feel, especially towards the end of the book, about the relationships that she forms early on, towards the end of the book, to have that make more impactful, but it just wasn't there. It was just very, very shallow, very nothing sort of kind of going on, which, you know, it's a choice. This is just how I kind of found it, and I just think, again, a few scenes were just missing through this book to really explore how she became closer. And the idea is, like, she is meant to be infatuated with this person, and we are meant to know this person isn't good for her. It's very obvious from the side character that she is just not a good person. I knew that from the get-go. She's not a good person, and, you know, we're meant to feel that, but again, it's just like Raina just sees this person and is just infatuated with her, and there's no sort of scene to sort of explain why. And then going back to, you know, Raina learns how to fight, and she learns how to use all of this magic. Same with, like, some of the other characters, but we do not see it, and I want to see it. I want to learn with the characters. I don't want to be told about all this kind of stuff, which, you know, some people find that fine. I just didn't. I really would have liked more of an exploration through this, and to learn, you know, how Raina really feels and her motivations, and how she would struggle to learn how to do this and this and this, because she is how she is, and she's not allowed to do these kind of things. Because again, one of the characters who's actually getting close with shows her this big secret to anybody else, but I don't see a reason why she would show her the big secret, because I haven't been shown, I don't believe that they're actually closer as they are. And again, it's still going on about characters. You have this, you know, I can't say the fucking word. Benevolent, no. Benevolent. You get what I mean. You get what I mean. Lady and Lord. And it's hinted in a lady. Like, she's showing herself as being this nice person, but actually deep down I didn't believe it. And But then her husband, we're told, and I'm like, but he doesn't seem that bad. He just seems like a big bully that if you just dress him down, he'd run in a corner and hide. So it just didn't, half the stuff in this I didn't really believe was actually going to happen. And I'm going to repeat myself again, add more scenes, and I think I really would have believed it. I think if you just one more round of editing, or one more just tightening up and really making me think, oh, okay, this is exactly what happened, this is what's going to happen, I would have just been like, yep, I'm there, I believe everything you're saying. Now I'm gonna talk about the ending, right? I'm not going to spoil it, I'm going to keep it very vague, but this is where the story really, really grew. It was the strongest point, okay? Yes, I found the ending rushed. I do think, especially when you get to the last 2 chapters, they should have been switched, because I think it would have been far more impactful to end on Eva's POV and what happening to her after what happened with everything that was going on to stop this god from rising up was the whole point of this. Her point of view, it would have been so much more impactful, and it would have driven me to really, really, really want to pick up book 2. But then we had that extra chapter, and I was like, I understand why it's there, because we needed to see it. But at the same time, I'm like, well, you've lulled me now too much. So it's this big thing that happens, the big, you know, antagonist thing happening at the end, yada, yada, yada. Then we have the aftermath of that, which, you know, it's fine. You need to wind down the story if that is what you want to do. But then we have a reveal in Eva's POV, but then we skip to Raina. I'm like, but the reveals got me so excited, but then Raina's POV at the end is just a bit like, oh, okay. Like, I understand why you're doing this, especially with building character moments, like between her and a particular character at the end of that chapter. Fucking loved it. I loved how that went. I loved how Raina was really stepping into her own. It was just amazing. But, again, I want to pick up at 2, but at the end of that, I was a bit like, oh, okay, so it just kind of ended. It didn't really give me any sort of drive. It didn't, you know, like, oh my god, like I did with Eva. Are you seeing that Eva is now my favourite POV? Because again, with Eva and her relationship, with how things go through with a particular person that she ends up meeting, you know, how everything happens and how she is dealing with it and how she is growing into somebody who isn't who we all think she is at the beginning. Especially, you know, when you think about her as a very pious person and growing in a very pious household. And it's just fascinating. I love watching that. I love their dynamics. And again, how everything came together towards the big climax was well done. Again, a little bit clunky, but I loved it. I was here for it. I was cheering. I was like, yes, give me this. And my suspicions that I had going for this book were right. It was definitely right. And I fucking loved that I was right. Again, because it's not something that was just like so predictable. Apparently, I just can't fucking talk today. But again, it was something, it wasn't so predictable, but it was something that I knew that was threaded out. But there were a few things that were hinted that I do think needed to be threaded throughout the manuscript. I'm getting all technical now, through the story. And it would have just made it a little bit more stronger. But again, I loved it. The whole proper ending where tension should be there. Again, it's very much rushed. I just really would have expected, especially when you kind of think of Relena's relationship to everybody that she's now facing and the implications of what's going to happen that she has to stop. It's kind of like very shallow and quick in how it was told, especially when you consider what she does and how she, you know, deals with this particular person who has feelings for, but has also been using her a lot of the time. And it just kind of felt like they came around to a very quick end that was just not well done. And I kind of think that, especially when you have somebody who's meant to be this powerful witch, right, that everybody calls you the witch, and they ended up finding their end very, very quickly, you're a bit like, oh, okay, I wanted struggles, I wanted tension. And talking of tension, Raina's meant to be surviving she has this magic she has to put in her heart transplant to keep surviving. And they keep telling her that, you know, the implications of it, and you do see her being weak, but there are moments which just seems like she's not being weak at a convenient moment. It seems like, well, let's not put this here because I want this to happen, whereas actually if you inserted that and really inserted her struggling to do all of these things, even though she's still doing them, but just showing me a little bit of like stumbling or just thoughts or how her heart is really struggling, like overworking itself, and she can feel it overworking itself, that would have just created more of a tension than what actually ended up happening. I think that's my biggest issue with this book, right? There wasn't enough tension within this book. I didn't feel anything enough. I didn't feel enough of the characters, didn't feel enough of the relationship, I didn't feel enough of the tension. And I love tension in my books. Give me more tension. But again, I still enjoyed it. I'm very curious to see where the author's going to go with the story. And it was a fun read. I do recommend it. Like, I really do recommend it. I do have all these issues with it, but again, they're debut issues. But I still had a great fucking time. So if you could look past all of these things that I'm saying, do go read it. It's not every single page, every single chapter, but there are just a few little things that came across that were just a bit clunky, a little bit weak. And I just think, you know, tighten it up a bit and it would be an amazing fucking story, and I would have rated it probably 5 stars. But because I had these issues, because it was just that little bit clunky and the way it was told, I was like, that is pulling me out of the story. Not necessarily impacting a little bit on my enjoyment, but I still had a great fucking time. So overall, I think I'm going to call this 3.5 out of 5. And I highly recommend everybody go pick this up. If you've read this, let me know what your thoughts are. And if you like this kind of video, let me know. But anyway, I will see you in the next one.